Hey everybody, how are you all doing today? My name is Benny Lewis, and I'm going to be taking some language learning questions today. I've been doing these live Q&As quite a bit over the last few weeks to make sure I address any of the questions you guys are likely to have, and then I can start doing themed ones about specific languages. This one is scheduled ahead of time, but if you happen to be if you happen to want to jump in when I do these random ones, because I might do them spontaneously, then make sure you click the notifications icon to get that on your app, so you get a little ping and be able to message me whenever that happens. So let's see, Dakota is doing great, thanks for asking. Yeah, glad to hear that. Where are you typing to us from today, Dakota? By the way, people, I be streaming today on YouTube, on 2 Facebook accounts. That's my public figure page and the Flute in 3 Months page. I'm on Twitch, I'm on Beam, I'm on Hitbox, I'm on Periscope. So any of these places, type me a message and you will see it pop up here to the side. And I'm going to be going through these questions today. So, Drew wants to know, can I discuss my routine when I'm preparing for a C1 exam? Any tips for DELE, the Diploma de Español como Lengua Extranjera? So, I took the DELE C2, but the process for that is probably very similar. So, let me tell you what I did for that. Essentially, when I first moved to Salamanca, where the university is for, I think it's like, because it's where the language of Castellano originally came from. That university has a little bit of prominence in language learning for Spanish in particular. Because of that, I arrived there and I felt like my Spanish was, it was very good. I had reached the best stage that I could through lots of spoken practice, but it still didn't have that professional edge to it. So I feel like I kind of might have been a C1 spoken, because I had lots of complex conversations, but my written skills, my ability to have like genuinely complex conversations and explain or understand the very tricky grammar points, the final ones you would need to know to be a C2 speaker, and in my listening comprehension for those kinds of things, for complex conversations, because I'd only be used to ones which I'm currently taking part in. And as I mentioned to you guys in yesterday's live hangout, it's harder when you are not one of the participants. It kind of makes it harder to, that's why watching TV and so much is more difficult. So what I did to prepare for the C2 exam in Spanish was I looked up the mock exams or the past exams on the website of the Instituto Cervantes. So if you're doing a C2 in any of those languages, or any other language, you might find the website of the Alliance Française or the Goethe Institute or so on. So I found past exams and I found a teacher. So I think this is what made a big difference. I up until that point, had been learning the language very independently, learning Spanish just by finding whatever materials I could. But I think when you're in the C levels, it gets a lot harder to do that. I don't think I would be able to, without an extra layer of structure, pass any kind of C2 exam. So I found a teacher who was experienced in those exams. And I went to her several times a week. So she would give me written assignments. I would go home, do that homework, bring it back to her, and she would correct it in great detail. And that was very, very helpful, because my first written assignments I did very poorly, even though I was genuinely C1 speaker at that stage. But I did very, very poorly in the written exam. So she kept drilling me on those. I think I spent most of my time on written Spanish because that was my weakest part. And then in terms of listening comprehension, she would read the kind of things I would be tested on, and then she would ask me the questions. So that part is very very easy to replicate. And again, listening comprehension is one of my more difficult parts in the higher levels in languages. That's the part that I did not pass in my German C2 exam. But we did lots of practice. And then the same for the year I did it was a grammar section as well. But essentially you do all 4 of those sections as intensively as you can, improving as much as you can, and focusing on whatever your weakest one was. So in my case, the spoken part of Spanish, I was doing very well at this, and I was getting spoken practice anyway. Outside of my classes, I was being social and so on. And I actually ended up getting 96% in my C2 spoken component. So what that meant is when I was getting my lessons with this teacher, I focused on pretty much anything but speaking, because I didn't need to worry about that. And that was less fun because it's always nicer to do what you're stronger at. So that's kind of what I would recommend. I would say find a teacher and try to get intensive lessons, ideally somebody who's experienced in handling those kinds of exams in the past and who can help you with that. So I hope that answers your question, Drew. And let me see what else I can get to for you guys. So Leo says, hola Benny, saludos desde Colombia. Espero estés pasándola bien. Gracias por estos vídeos. De nada, Leo. Es un placer. And I had a great time in Colombia. Pasé 2 meses en Medellín y aprendí la salsa caleña. Tengo un video en mi canal de YouTube. Y puedo ver cómo bailaba. Okay, so let's see. Marcia says ciao. Wintermute782 says, hi Mr. Lewis, any advice on expanding the ability to use French grammar? Okay, French grammar. Let's see if I can tell you from my experience with that. Again, I worked my way up to an exam that was the first one of these formal European Common Framework exams that I did. I did the French B2, and I feel like with French, I don't think there was anything specific to French with grammar that I did that I didn't do in my other languages. So I would just say you have to get a lot of exposure to it. You have to try to use it actively. I think what helped probably would be that my my language teachers, especially for French, because I feel like French people, more so than other natives of other languages, are more aware of their grammar. Like even myself as an English speaker, when I started traveling and people asked me, Benny, why do I say I did in this situation, but I have done in that situation? Then my answer would be, because one is right and the other isn't in that situation. I wouldn't know how to explain grammar. I mean, I had to do a TEFL certificate, and I had to actually go and study English grammar, not to improve my English, but just to understand it so I could teach it for a while. But I find French people tend to know their own grammar very well. So this means that it's very useful for learners, because you could be talking with French people and make a grammar mistake, and they're more likely to be able to tell you, actually, you should say it this way because that's a feminine, or because that verb uses être instead of avoir. So I would get as much practice with French speakers as you can, and yeah, I mean, it's more a case of practice. I think the tricky parts of all grammar in all languages just need you to dive into using it genuinely in real life, and then when you find you're not doing as well as you'd like, in that case, picking up a grammar book. And tomorrow I can actually show you my French grammar. I have a French grammar book here, and I can show that to you because I think last time, no, I didn't actually show my grammar books last time. So I'll show you exactly what I do for that. I'll be able to answer that question next time. So I'm still catching up with your questions. I'm hoping I can get to as many as I can today. But again, Make sure, guys, to have the notifications on for these live Q&As, because then you'll be one of the first people who gets the ping and comes in and asks me one of these questions. Because I tend to, as you can see, I tend to answer the first questions in a lot more depth, and then I have to start rushing at the second half. But we're still good around now that I should be getting to most of the questions coming in at the moment. Okay. So Arash Rasmus Estofil. Is that with two eyes? Estofil. Hey Benny from Estonia. How would you go for increasing your rate of speech and become like a native speaker? I consider Estonia as my home country. My reason for wanting to become a native speaker. Okay, so Arash wants to pass for a native speaker of Estonian, I presume. So increasing your rate of speech, I would say don't have that as your goal. I mean, maybe you are a naturally fast speaker. If so, great, then that's what you want to do. But keep in mind, you do not need to pass yourself as a native. Like, that's a different thing, passing as a native. But if you want to have less of an accent, and you want people to be less aware that you're a foreigner, speaking quickly is not the solution. Because a lot of people tend to, when they speak any language, native speakers can speak slowly and intentionally. So what I would aim for is not to be not to increase your rate of speech, but just to increase your confidence of speech. I feel like showing more confidence lets people feel more comfortable and feel like you're closer to being a native speaker. So don't try to speak faster. Try to speak with more intention. So that means you can have pensive pauses, and so it's something that a lot of orators do, is they have like pauses in their sentence. And anytime you guys might remember watching an Obama speech, he would not have like a long list of word. He would say stuff and then pause for effect. And then he continued speaking. And that's kind of something I try to keep in mind when I'm speaking another language, that if I have to squeeze so many words into a short period of time, then I'm way more likely to make mistakes. I'm way more likely to make pronunciation errors. Whereas if I have more time to collect my thoughts and remember, how was that expression again? Or rethink of a mnemonic that I might need. That's how I get that time, is those little pauses. But if you otherwise want to become more like a native speaker, there's lots of aspects to that. One is like aiming for the C2 level, so in pure content of the language, and see what the highest level exam that they have in the country. And what I was saying at the beginning, everything I said for the first question, of preparing for one of those exams, because that'll force you to have that very, very high level. The other thing, though, is not related to the content and just in how you sound. So that's in part just being more confident, because I feel like non-native speakers stand out not so much in what they're saying, but in how they're saying it. Like the very obvious discomfort that they're feeling as they're speaking. And then the other is in musicality. And I managed to, in one of the very first projects I had on the blog, Flint in 3 months, I wanted Brazilians to think that I was Brazilian. And what I was not doing was preparing for a C2 level Portuguese exam. My Portuguese would have only been B2. But what I tried to do was make it so that if I would go to a social situation, that at least, and I would meet somebody and be consistently talking with them, then at least for like 30 seconds, they might think initially that I'm Brazilian. And the way I got to that was actually by getting singing lessons. So I would have improved my Portuguese. I learned new words and expressions. But what I was putting most of my time into was how it sounded as I was speaking it. And my music teacher knew things that I think a language teacher wouldn't have been as aware of. So she told me, if you speak Portuguese from Brazil, you gotta go up and down all the time, speak through your nose, and combine your words together. And that's how I learned how to like improve my Portuguese with that kind of an accent, because in English we tend to separate our words like this. So that's something I needed to unlearn. And because of that, I did actually reach the stage in my last week where people started to think initially that I was Brazilian, and then after 40 seconds, I would make a mistake. I'd make some grammar mistake, or I'd forget a word, I'd say something unnatural, or I would slip up in my pronunciation. And that's kind of, that's fine, because I did get to that initial stage, and I think kind of pushing it forward would have made it so that I would have lasted longer. So I hope that answers your question about how to pass yourself off as a native speaker. I would see if you could consider how you would do that with Estonian. Okay, so moving on. We have Leo on YouTube asked, do you think it's useful to learn languages now that there are new gadgets like the live translator? I've actually written a blog post on this. Maybe James can share it if you search for Universal Translator on the blog. Essentially, the dream of a lot of people is that you have something like the Universal Translator in Star Trek. Or the Babelfish from, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where you just have something in your ear that automatically translates stuff. And the thing is, I am extremely skeptical that this is realistic in any stage in the next few decades. And the reason is I'm coming from two different perspectives on this. I'm coming from the language learning perspective, because I've put time into learning these languages, and I was a translator, a professional translator for several years. So I understand the nuance involved in taking something in one language and turning it into the same phrase in another language, and how difficult that is, and how you really need to have like a real person to help with that. So I understand that kind of language aspect to it, but I also understand the technology aspect, because I have a degree in electronic engineering and I've written software, and I could see how Google Translate, especially, is improving a lot. It is definitely getting better. It's very impressive in what it can do. But its algorithms are based off a lot of the time, it takes other translations and improves and gets corrections, but it's still operating off text, and it's not operating as much off context. It's not going to take emotions into account. It's right now not able to take how your voice incorporates maybe that you're being sarcastic, or that you're nervous, and all these emotional aspects of the language that really do change the meaning of what you're saying, such that they'd have to be translated very differently. A lot of that is not handled. Now, it will get handled more and more, but realistically, I don't think live translators are going to be a useful replacement for language learning, except for basic touristy situations. So if you're learning a language, or if you're not learning a language and you go to a country and you just want to know how to say, where is the supermarket, and you bring up Google Google Translator, and its voice recognition recognizes that and produces French for the other person. That's fine. It'll do that. It will do that, and it'll be very good at doing that, because that's a very simple, immediate exchange. But I've seen these apps misrepresented for how they do their translations. I mentioned that in the blog post that James has just shared, how one of the apps kind of exaggerated how it was actually doing its translation. And so I think that it's not realistic how it's happening right now. And what we really need for us to be at that stage is essentially to have our technology at the stage where it is pure artificial intelligence. It's as good as a human being, because only then would it replace the human translator. So essentially, by the time we reach that stage, artificial intelligence would be good enough to replace every job. So translators don't really have to worry about their jobs getting lost, or language learners, language teachers don't have to really worry about their jobs getting lost, until everyone has to worry about that. Geography teachers and lawyers and all of these other jobs When we're at the stage where those guys are going to be losing their job because of artificial technology, then we'll be at the stage when automatic translations will actually be a useful replacement for language learning. And at that point, probably a good 20 or 30 years off at least, if not much, much more. So we'll see. I hope that answers that question. So I'm not worried about live translators. It's fine that they replace tourist things. Okay, so Jonathan, a regular contributor to these live hangouts, says he's hosting me in his language exchange group. So hello to everybody in the language exchange group, and I hope I'll be able to get to all your questions. Okay, and then Drew, who I was answering question of before, says, hablo desde Lima, Perú. Perú. También pasé 3 meses en Perú y aprendí un poquito del quechua. Runasimita rimanquichu. That's my little dabble of quechua for you there. Okay. So, now, next question we have Michael on YouTube. He says, where can you find materials and activities for language exchanges once you get beyond introductions? How do you find activities to work on specific languages? Okay, so once you get beyond introductions, I would say for that, well, it depends on what you want to talk about, and it is tricky because with language exchanges, unlike with getting private lessons, you both have to be learning the language and speaking it as a beginner, and you have to be orchestrating how the conversation is progressing, and that's a lot of work. So I would get those kind of materials ready ahead of time. I would see what I would see what language courses you have available to you that have exercises in some kind of discussions. Usually good courses tend to have these at the end of a unit. They might say, gather your class around and discuss the future of tourism in this city, or whatever it may be. It would depend on what material you're interested in. Otherwise, there's a blog post that we either have coming up or that we had recently about how to play games in the language, and I think it's coming up in the blog in a couple of weeks. And when you see that talks about a couple of games that we've like the team FI3M we knew would work well in language learning classes. So I think if you have a chance to read that when it comes up, that'll probably help you out. Okay, so next we have a question over on Facebook. Dakota again says, I'm tuning in from Korolyov, Russia. Sorry, switching between trying to pronounce things and going back to English. Outside of Moscow. I really appreciate all the content you've been putting out lately. How do you set yourself up for success in regards to making sure to study and use materials, even when life gets hectic and busy? I tend to learn in bursts, but also burn out quickly. Any advice? Very good question. Okay, so how do you set yourself up for success even when you're getting hectic and busy? So what I find works really well for me is having kind of mini missions. So I might have the grand mission where after 3 months I want to reach level B2 or level B1, or after a month and a half I want to have my first real conversation. Whatever my big goal is, you have that and you try to see how can you achieve that in a shorter space of time. Like, not achieve that. How can you achieve the components that would get you there in a shorter space of time, like a week? So what I would do is I'd try to see, like, what this week, how can I get there? And I would have something I need to produce by the end of the week. So I find that my italki sessions, they work well, but one thing that worked really well for me, and you guys will see this, and it's actually the reason I started Fluent in 3 months, was partly because obviously I wanted to help people out. I had language learning ideas I wanted to share with the world, but there was also a more selfish reason why I started the blog and to upload as often as I did on the YouTube channel, was because I'd have that accountability, because during my intensive projects I upload a new video once a week. So I would be working towards uploading that video at the end of the week. And that's a lot more pressure. That's a lot more immediate. Because if I'm just thinking, at the end of 6 months, I want to be at this level, that's fine, but that is not going to make it very easy for me along the way to keep up my progress. So you need pressure, and I would say some kind of accountability. So in my case, that was that I need to produce a YouTube video every week that would show some kind of progress. So I might have a theme to it, and I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be, like, usually my first video, I would give a tour of my apartment. So that wouldn't involve me interacting with anybody, but it would involve me trying to produce the language consistently. So I might prepare the script ahead of time, learn what I'm going to say, practice it, and that's, and that's a very goal-oriented thing that would keep me very active as I'm trying to learn the language. And then I'd reach that stage and it would be exhausting, but I'd feel that, rush. I'd be like, yes, I did it. I gave the tour of my tiny studio apartment. Like, if you guys watch my Mandarin project, my studio apartment in Taipei was so small, it was tiny, and yet I think it took me 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes to give a tour of that place because I was struggling so much. But having that to work up towards, it was hard, but it gave me purpose, So I was busy. I needed to edit those videos. I needed to, I still had to kind of maintain my blog and try to make friends. I was like doing other things. And there have been other projects that I've been trying to, like, when I was doing the German C2 exam, I was writing my first ebook during that project. So I still had work I needed to do. But having those goals just meant that you were forced to make the time. Because we're all very busy, but sometimes when the opportunity comes and you have two things that you could do, you can either you've worked a hard day so you can turn on Netflix and watch your show, or you can do something to help you give yourself a burst in that language. You're going to end up, if you're in an intensive project and you have that pressure, you're going to choose the relax, take it easy option less, and you're going to just put the hard work in. So that's what I would say to help you genuinely make that kind of progress. Okay, so let me see. Sorry if I'm getting through your questions slowly. I want to answer these first questions as detailed as I can, because that way you guys who were here first, who had the little notification and jumped in and asked your questions, that way I'm definitely going to be getting to those. So make sure you have these notifications set, everybody. Okay, so let's see. So Language Hacker says, "Hi Benny, can you tell me about learning a language through song? Is it a good method?" Absolutely. I'll tell you what. There's a guest post on my blog, and James can share the link with you. It was written by Andrew, and he showed how he learned Shakira's. I forget which song was by Shakira, but he shared how he learned that song, that Spanish song, and he wrote a blog post about it. So if you read that blog post, I thought like his method was very clever, and that's what I would advise you try to do. So yeah, like pick a song and very intentionally learn the lyrics. Don't just listen to music, but like really hone in, and see like what the phrases are in the song. Try to understand them, talk about them with your teacher, and try to sing along if you can. Okay, so I got random questions like, what do you think about like these languages? I always find those funny, because I don't know what to tell you guys. You ask me, like Leo says, what do I think about the official UN languages? Spanish, French, English, Russian, Chinese, and Arabic. I'm like, what do I think? I think they're the official UN languages. I don't know. Like, do you want me to say? I think French is fat, and I think that Arabic isn't adventurous enough. I mean, I'm not. I need more specific questions, like rather than what do you think or how do I learn this language. So just keep that in mind, guys. Okay, how do you get chances to learn languages in countries for a year? Is a question on Facebook from Luis. So for a whole year, I'd say the easiest way would be if you are if you're studying in university and you are in Europe, then you should look into the Erasmus exchange program. It's very good. It has the third year studied abroad. It's something done by a lot of universities in Europe. If you're not in Europe, then still investigate. If you're studying in university, investigate what exchange programs your university has, because those you may find one that gives you a year abroad, and that's the easiest way because you get that kind of support. You're still using your time well because you're continuing your studies. Otherwise, to live abroad for a year, there'd be you'd need to like save up money for that. You'd need to set up a job. You can something else that I personally did actually when I first graduated from university is I had a work exchange program. Sorry about the sirens. I had a work exchange program. It was called IAESTA, and that was for engineers and architects, and I was the engineer in that. And they put me in Spain and I was working as an engineer, and it was great because if I had tried myself to go to Spain at that time when I was not an experienced traveler and I did not speak any Spanish, I would have found it very difficult to find work. Whereas they set it up for me and it was decently paid and so on. So try to find a work or study exchange program because those tend to do the logistics for you. Okay? Now, let's see. I'm going to start not getting to every single question and going to the more interesting ones. So otherwise, I would be commenting on silly questions. And I know that's not a good use of people's time here. So, and Drew says, vivo en Salamanca, Lima, Peru. Yeah, that's right. There's a district in Lima called Salamanca. Okay. Yeah, general language question. Okay, Fred asked me, have you tried learning any Creoles or Pidgin languages? I haven't. But it's not really Creole or Pidgin, but I have learned a few non-standard languages. I've learned dialects, which I know it's not quite the same thing, but because they're like subsets of the main language, technically. But you do have a similar problem in not having as many resources. So in my case, I tried to learn Quebec French specifically, and what I always tell people about when you want to learn dialects is you learn the main standard version of the language up until intermediate level. Don't try to learn a dialect from the very start. That's a lot harder because you don't have as many materials to help you with the specifics of that dialogue, where there's loads of materials for many languages for the main version. But then once you get to that intermediate level, if there are things written in that language about learning that language, that's going to help you a lot. Or you get lessons from native speakers. And I had the same issue with Arabic. There's tons of materials on modern standard Arabic, but very few, not as many for the dialects, even a big one like Egyptian Arabic. So I Skyped a native speaker. So if you're learning a Creole or a Pidgin language, you might want to see what materials can you find to get you as far as you can get with just those materials. Depending on the language, it might be harder or easier. And then when you're at that stage, try to Skype somebody. Or if you know someone in person, try to meet them and get those intensive lessons in person. And that's going to help you progress in the language. If you have a good teacher, they're going to help you with that. All right, so moving on. And we've loads of people interacting with each other. And great job. I see a few people answering one another's questions. So this isn't these live Q&As. They're not just about talking with me. You guys can actually see a lot of very smart people in these comments. So definitely, if you guys know the answer to something, feel free to reply to someone and help them out, because that's what this is all about. We've got a nice community of people here, very willing to help one another out. Okay. So, do you know any good resources? yeah, so there's some questions here that I've tackled in other live Q&As, so I won't be able to get to those. How am I doing? I'm getting up to the 20-minute point more or less, which is good. I'm as long as I'm like halfway behind the time of the live hangout, then I'm doing pretty good. If I only get like to the first 10%, then I know I'm giving too long answers. So I like to maintain a little balance, you know. Wintermute782 on YouTube, he asks resources specific to Quebec French, which is interesting because I just mentioned that. Yes, I can tell you if you search for Le Québécois en 10 leçons. So that's the Quebec in 10 lessons, I guess. And the thing is, that's written in French. I think you might be able to find something on Quebec French in English, but it's probably not going to be as in depth. So if first try to get to an intermediate French level, and then that book is very good. It's written by one of the people in the language learning community, and he's written a guest post on my blog if you search for that as well. Okay, do you have any? So, let's see. Okay, I'm going to try and read this comment, and I'm warning you guys that I am going to mess it up. It's going to sound horrible. People are probably going to make meme videos of it, like, you know, synchronized to really bad music and with me photoshopped into weird places, but I'm going to try this anyway. Okay. Bon dia, Benny. Has practicat parlant català molt? T'agradaria millorar el tu nivell en la llengua? Jo visc a Catalunya i parlo català, però no puc parlar castellà. Okay, probably totally messed that one up. But this is from Bobby, who says, have you practiced speaking Catalan a lot? Would you like to improve your level in the language? I live in Catalonia and I speak Catalan, but I can't speak Castilian Spanish, which is very interesting. I didn't think that there were, because I know that in Ireland, for instance, we have Irish, but you just will never meet somebody who speaks a high level of Irish and does not speak English. That's just not even possible. But it's interesting to see that that would be possible, that the non-majority language can actually be spoken better, or like way more than the majority language of the country. Okay, so I have practiced Catalan. I lived in Barcelona for 2 months, and I do want to improve my level in that. I actually had the opportunity last year. A friend of mine got married, like somewhere like an hour and a half drive from Barcelona into Catalonia, and I could understand his parents as they were speaking to one another. So I do remember parts of it that I had learned, but whenever I would try to speak it, it's like any language that you don't maintain very well, that you're going to lose your level. So I would like to push my Catalan up a notch someday, for sure. I might have a second project on that. And if you want to read about my Catalan experience, then I've written about it, not so much on my blog, but I actually wrote a guest post. If you guys look for Everything Everywhere, I guess search for, or James can put the link in, Everything Everywhere, search for Benny Lewis, and you'll see a guest post I wrote about my intensive experience in Barcelona learning Catalan. You might find that interesting. Okay, so Shivani says, thanks for all the motivation. Can you please suggest books for learning French? Feel free to ask me that question tomorrow, because tomorrow, everybody, I'm doing another live Q&A, but since I've been doing as many of these like general ones to kind of make sure I was tackling as many issues as you guys would have had, I'm going to get back into doing specific themes to these. So tomorrow I'll be doing books and courses. Specifically, I want to show you guys some of my books, and as I mentioned before, I'll actually make sure to show you one of my grammar books, the series of grammar books that I happen to like, as well as a few others. So feel free to ask any book and course questions tomorrow. So that's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So you can do the conversion on what that would be. That was like 8 p.m. in London, 9 p.m. in Paris, and midday in on the west coast of America. So yeah, check that out tomorrow. And again, click notifications, guys. Make sure you got notifications popping up in your app and you will not miss any of these. Okay, so let's see. Brian asked a question over on Facebook. Do you have any suggestions on how to get past the brain overload of understanding a foreign language in real time? Specifically, I'm learning Spanish and the native speakers don't seem to like pauses. So by the time I've understood what's being said, formulated a reply and translated each way, the moment has already passed. Do you guys remember an episode of The Simpsons where I think Homer is in Lenny's house and they're playing poker or something? And Lenny says to Homer that he's stupid or something. And you just kind of zoom into his head and you hear his voiceover saying, hold on, did he just call me stupid? I won't stand for that. And he stands up and says, no, you can't do that to me. And it's nighttime, and then he's walking out in his dressing gown and like thing. Are you still here? Because he spent all day long trying to process that thought. That is how I feel, and I feel your pain, Brian. That's how I feel when I learn languages as a beginner, and especially languages that they tend to speak a little bit quickly. Spanish from Spain being one of them. It sometimes feels like you're having a conversation with a machine gun, because they're like, estoy español y estoy hablando muy rápido. You know, just like a tirade of words at you. So what, if you're trying to understand what's being said, formulating a reply and translating each way, it's going to take its toll on you. I know that's going to be very hard. So what I would suggest that you do for that is, firstly, especially if it's Spanish from Spain, try to practice it with non-native speakers, because this is a little thing that I found very useful for me. I felt very intimidated by Spanish from Spain. I did find that they spoke very quickly to me as a beginner. And then I would say, ¿puedes hablar más despacio, por favor? And they'd be like, yeah, sure, and then slow down for 10 seconds and then speed up again. But what worked was I got loads of practice with non-native speakers. I went out with the Erasmus group and I met some Germans and French and Italians, and they spoke slower, and what they spoke about was less complex, so it was a lot easier for me to process as a beginner, and that helped me fix the issues I had as a beginner to get over them, and then that meant that I was more enhanced when the chance came to speak with the native speakers. So that's one thing. Another is, if you don't really have that opportunity and you can only really speak with the natives, is instead of trying to understand everything being said and formulating a grammatically perfect reply, you may have to just accept that you're going to sound like Tarzan. And I know that ideally you hear all these words said to you and you would have the time to analyze them, and you know you can do it, and it's frustrating because you know you're at the stage where it's not like you don't understand. You do understand, you just need a little time. But unfortunately, you don't have that time, so you just have to accept that you're going to get the gist of what they're saying. You're not going to understand everything, but you're going to kind of know what they're talking about. And you're going to just like very quickly get your answer out, because they're going to continue to want to converse with you if the conversation progresses. And the best way to do that is just say something quickly. So you might not be able to give a very well thought out answer. You might give an answer that unfortunately conjugates a verb wrong and so on. But that's okay, because the focus, if you're still feeling intimidated by the speed of the conversation, the focus should still be on communicating. You need to get more comfort in that communication. You need to, otherwise, outside of those, practice your listening comprehension, and maybe James can share the podcast link in the comments here. That'll take you to one of my favorite podcasts that I think would help you with your Spanish listening comprehension. So you practice that as much ahead of time, not when you're talking to people live. And then you will be better when you are having those live sessions to be able to actually like hear what they say and process it quickly. So that's what I would say for that. Okay. So Jonathan says, if you guys love Benny's live Q&A videos, then share this video with your language learning friends. Sharing is caring. I can definitely say I appreciate that, and that's a good idea. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Jonathan does stuff on teaching English, so guys, click his name and see the stuff he does. He's doing live videos as well, and he'll help you guys with your own kind of language learning if you're into that, especially with English. Okay, so let's see, flicking through some of these questions now. Okay. Mysterious Labyrinth says, great to see these live broadcasts, and bits and bobs of other languages, and 3 mainly. It's trying to learn more languages, but it's a challenge when one doesn't have somebody to practice with. Yeah, that's why I'd have to just say italki. If you check out italki, that's the way I would find someone to practice with, depending on the language. And then otherwise, something I actually will be doing. I wanted to do it yesterday, but I didn't have the technical setup in time. And you need. I've learned with live videos, you have to have the technical setup ahead of time for these things. I want to show you guys how I use live videos to get language practice, to interact with people. So it's not just Skype where it's one-on-one. You can, if you're intimidated by that idea, you can kind of take it back a step and still be live interacting with somebody, but they're not interacting with only you. So it takes the pressure off. You can still type your replies. So what I'm going to do at some stage, probably during the week, is share several, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, share these live streams with you in a live stream. I'm going to call it something like Liveception, because it's multiple layers of live. And I'm going to show you what I do to get that kind of practice. So I'm not going to schedule that. I'm not going to tell you guys when I do that. I'm going to do that whenever I feel like doing that. And that means that when you will get the notification best if you have the little notification activated in your apps or in your browsers as well. You can do that. Okay, so have you heard of stuff? No. So do you think Ukrainian is a good language to learn? Pepper King, I'm going to tell you something. Ukrainian is the best language in the world to learn. The best! You should just learn it, seriously. Why isn't everybody learning it? If you go to the Ukraine, you're there. It's the best language. Oh my God, you gotta learn the best language ever. Okay, so that's the answer I'm gonna give you guys if you ask me if a language is good, if that makes any sense. Okay, let's see. I'm getting there. I'm 20 minutes behind myself, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm, my flux capacitor, I had the 21.1 gigawatts, I would say gigawatts, by the way, or 1.1, I forget the number, of power, and I've traveled back in time. I'm following myself and making sure not to bump into myself, because according to the rules of Jean-Claude Van Damme's time travel, Time Cop, if that happens, then the universe will explode or something. So I'm keeping that in mind, but I'm otherwise 20 minutes behind myself, chasing myself. Okay. Let's see, some questions I've covered in the past. Alright, so John Anderson says, hi Benny, I'm working on Icelandic right now for the Polyglot Conference in October. But this is the first language I've ever tried where I'm having problems finding people to speak with me. Any advice? Great question, John. For this one, this question I remember coming up in the community a few years ago, where someone had told me, yeah, Benny, I agree, I know what you're saying, but I've tried to find Icelandic teachers on italki and it hasn't worked out. I've tried to find Icelandic speakers at international events like Couchsurfing, and I've gone to Erasmus parties and I never find native Icelandic speakers, and it can feel pretty impossible. But I would say the best thing you can do, John, is maybe try to find non-native speakers of Icelandic, because maybe Iceland as a small country, you're not going to get that kind of dispersion of natives all over the place. But there's still a lot of people like yourself who want to learn Icelandic. All you need to do is make sure you find those people who are either at the same level as you, maybe slightly below or slightly above you. And those people can teach you a lot. And I would say maybe go back on the sites like italki and Couchsurfing and so on. Go back on these sites that you might have tried before, and you might have looked for a native speaker, and maybe just look for speaks the language at any level and see if you can do an exchange. You might, if you speak French, for instance, you might find a German speaker who speaks Icelandic and who speaks at an intermediate level, and they really want to learn French, and you could teach them French. And even though it's not your native language necessarily, and Icelandic isn't their native language necessarily, you can still help each other. So I would say this like when the question came up, I think in the forums or something a few years ago, and we suggested this, someone said it actually worked. They actually went and tried to find these non-native speakers of specifically Icelandic they were learning, and they managed to get that practice. So it's not always about the native speakers. All right. Okay, so let's see. Siberian. Okay. Now let's see. The trilinguist. Tri spelled T-R-Y. Very clever. I like that. Says, I hope to work as an au pair in Spain as a way to immerse myself and improve my fluency. However, if I'm expected to speak to the children mostly in English, how can I maximize my Spanish progress? Okay, if you have the chance, actually, I've made 2 videos on my YouTube channel about au pairs. While I was in Amsterdam, I was on a great video interview rush there, because that's when I did my Quebec French video. But I also found through Couchsurfing, I found 2 people who were au pairs. Both of them happened to be Spanish speakers who were in Amsterdam to improve their English, of all things. But the way that if you see those interviews, you'll see how they managed to kind of get that balance, because with the children, they had to speak Spanish the whole time. Essentially, what you need to do is, if you're speaking to the children mostly in English, to maximize your Spanish progress, it means that every single thing that you do outside of that house has to be in Spanish. So I was an English teacher in Spain myself, and my job was to speak English. And if I started speaking Spanish to the kids to get language practice, I was a bad teacher. Simple as that. So I just made it so that when I stepped in that door, I would speak English. I'm getting paid to do that. And when I stepped out, I was speaking Spanish. And you might run into people who want to practice, like when you're out and about, going out in the town or something, you bump into people, you might find they want to practice English with you. And sometimes you just got to put your foot down. I told people very matter-of-factly, yeah, okay, I'll practice English with you. That'll be €20 an hour, please. Pay up. Because that is, they're not going to love hearing that. But ultimately, I was the one who went all the way to Spain, and I was getting paid to speak English during the day. So if someone wanted to hear me speak English, then they're going to have to pay up, because I was otherwise in Spanish mode, exclusively Spanish mode. So you just need to make sure that when you're not with those kids, you are exclusively speaking Spanish. I hope that helps. Okay. So we are coming up on the hour. But I'm not in a huge rush today, so I'm going to keep going, guys. All right, I'm going to see how much of your questions I can get to. I will be doing this for a maximum 30 more minutes, but if I can catch up to your questions before then, I might wrap it up earlier. So you can keep asking me questions right now. I know a lot of you might be worried that your questions are going to get missed because it's getting to the end, but if you've stuck out this far, because I usually get the big boost at the start, and then people kind of worry their question won't be answered and they start to head off. So if you stuck out this far, actually do hit me with some questions. Just because I'm skipping a lot of questions doesn't mean I won't skip yours, because doesn't mean I will skip yours, because I am seeing which questions I like the look of to answer now, and I'm going to answer those. But again, make sure you got notifications to get into one of the earlier ones. Okay, so Jonathan, in response to what I was saying 20 minutes ago, says, your weekly accountability videos have been incredibly inspiring to countless language learners from around the world and have even inspired great initiatives such as the Add One Challenge. Consistent progress and solid efforts make a big difference. Thanks for inspiring us all. Thank you for that. Very, very kind words. Really appreciate that. Kleber says, adorei seu livro, Benny. Obrigado. Very nice of you. Okay, Slyn says, okay, yeah, here's an interesting specific question. Hey Benny, this is Slyn over on YouTube. Do you have some advice for French orthography? I speak Spanish and its orthography is a lot easier and regular, so I'm confused with the French one. Like, am I getting this mixed up? See, I'm not a technical guy. Is orthography the like phonetic rules? Orthography. See, this shows you the level of. Okay, according to Google, orthography is the conventional spelling system. Okay, I thought it was the spelling system. I just needed to double check because otherwise I would have really had egg on my face if I started talking about, how they put accents over letters and like waffled on about that for a while. So the phonetic to spelling rules in Spanish are pretty easy because it's almost always 1-to-1. One letter has one sound, but a few like small exceptions like CH and QU. But generally, it's very, very simple that you can hear a word and know very confidently how it's pronounced, and you can pronounce a word yourself and know that you're likely to be doing it right. But with French, it's different. French has kind of consonants that you don't pronounce at the end of words, and has liaisons that connect the words together. So to get a hang of that, what I would do is, what helped me a lot for that, if you have a teacher or a language partner, is to read to them. So you take a text, ideally something you're likely to talk about, but you can also get more or less the same benefits if you just take a news article from somewhere online. You take that text and you read it to your teacher. And as you're reading it, they can correct you, or ideally, because I feel like getting corrections as you are speaking, you can feel intimidated. What I do at my own French teacher, like for our C-level classes, is she actually has a Google Doc open during our class, and she'll write down the mistakes I'm making. So that way, she's speaking to me and interacting with me, and it's kind of feels natural that way. But she's also separately noting, and I can, in the corner of my eye, see my mistakes and note them as I'm making them. It's kind of a layer below like constant feedback, which I find very useful. But yeah, read aloud to a native French speaker, and they'll start correcting you as you make those mistakes. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. Otherwise, if you got a good book, it'll explain the process of how this is pronounced that way in this situation. And that's good. That is useful. It's good to know those rules, but it's very hard to internalize them unless you're actually practicing. So I find myself, at least, I would learn, and I did learn French orthography, and I'm using the word right. Yes. Sorry guys, I'm not a linguist, so I don't know these terms very, very well. I learned my French orthography by just speaking written French aloud and getting corrections and learning that way and seeing, and the teacher can explain it to you. Like I said earlier in this live hangout, French speakers, more so than a lot of other countries, tend to know how to explain their language from a technical perspective. They learn this stuff in school at a level I feel like is not the same in other countries. So they have an extra understanding of their own language. So yeah, get that kind of feedback from a native speaker. Okay, so let's see. Learning English, learning one romance language. Wintermute says, thanks for the answer. More than welcome. Lucy says, are you planning on starting learning Japanese again? I'm learning Japanese and I was very interested in your project. Yeah, Japanese, I think I got like 2 months into the project, and then the first book I wrote, Fluent in 3 months, the work started piling up too much on that, so I couldn't continue it, unfortunately. I was enjoying that project. So I don't plan on restarting that right now because I don't plan on going to Japan in the near future. But anytime that I have upcoming travels that I'd be sharing with you guys, then I'll also share the language project. And I'm going to have this year a few intensive language learning projects that I'll share with you. Japanese is not going to be one of them this year, but maybe it will next year. So I hope that answers that question. And keep in mind, guys, like you'll see this on this YouTube channel, the Benny Lewis YouTube channel. But if you search for Fluent in 3 Months, the YouTube channel, and James can share a link with you. If you search for that, that is a second community channel where we share other people's projects. And because I'm trying to do, as you can see, I'm doing loads of videos, but they're not videos of my language learning missions. They're videos where I'm helping people to learn other languages themselves, and I'm doing these live Q&As and stuff. Because of that, I know people enjoy those mission videos, so we have other people's missions as they're happening, and we share them on that other YouTube channel. And it's doing pretty well. It's up to over 8,000 subscribers because of how much people are enjoying that. And right now we have, I think Holly's learning Portuguese, and you guys can follow that mission. So go to the Fluent in 3 Months YouTube channel, check that out, and subscribe to that, and you'll see other people sharing their own, like sometimes 3 months, sometimes other periods, missions like that. So yeah, I hope that that helps you get that inspiration following those missions. I won't be doing some of those languages myself. I obviously can't have like a Portuguese mission that I would share with you guys because I've already reached a certain level of Portuguese. The only thing I would be able to do is have like a specific like subset of Portuguese. But that kind of learning the language from scratch for a big language, you'll see a lot of those coming up on the Fluent in 3 Months channel. Well, I do other videos over on this channel. Okay, so yeah, and I'm kind of glancing over comments as they're coming up, and Sarka says, I'm going to flick now to give you guys an idea of that you still can get me as you're putting the comments. Sarka says, which language do you want to learn next, if any? I'm thinking about it, and I think, you know, don't quote me on this, but I think I'm going to have an intensive project to relaunch my Dutch. I think that might be my next one, because in April, I'm going to a conference in Europe. It's VidCon Europe. I'm very passionate about making videos, and I want to meet other people. I want to learn from them, and that's going to be in Amsterdam. So I would really like to like reactivate my Dutch. I feel like my Dutch has just gone too low. I don't really include it anymore when I list the languages that I speak. So I would like to include it again, so at least get it back up to the area it was. So Dutch is one, and I have other travels this year that if they're something I might spend like at least a few days in the country and be up for making some fun videos, then I will reactivate the language or learn it again. You know, another interesting one that was mentioned here is Icelandic. I've never learned Icelandic. I'm going to be trying to figure out that I could definitely make it to the Polyglot Conference in Iceland, and if I do, I'll have a mini Icelandic project. You know, so that's something I might get into. Aitor says, "Do you like Catalan?" I think other people here could tell you what my response would be to a question like that. Okay, Mariana shares an Icelandic teacher. Very good, thanks for that. Okay, and yeah, look at this. You guys are all answering one another's questions. I think this is great. Okay, so moving on back to where I was, back in time, you know, flux capacitor, I'm going 88 miles per hour, and boom, I'm now at 20 minutes ago, or if I get the number right, 18 minutes ago. Okay, so yeah. Oh yeah, Jonathan put a little time conversion for all the cities I was going to do my next hangout. Thanks for that, appreciate that. And some chat about Icelandic. Mysterious Labyrinth says, may I ask where in Spain you were and if you had any problems understanding the Andalusian accent? I lived in Valencia for 3 months. I lived in Barcelona for 2 months, I think, although that was to learn Catalan. I lived in Salamanca for 3 months, and I lived in Santa Cruz de Tenerife, Tenerife, for 3 months, I think it was. And I think I've spent at least another month or two in various other places, and I've never actually made it to Andalusia. So I'm going to try and see if I can head there this year. I haven't met loads of Andalusians. I know that they have a very unique accent that is tricky, and I've found it difficult initially to understand that. But I had, like, it's the kind of thing that if you live in Spain long enough, you will meet people from all over Spain. So I have I mean, I guess I wouldn't say I have problems understanding it. I understand it. I guess I just need to like focus a little bit more if they have a particularly strong accent. But yeah, I don't think it's extremely difficult. I think enough exposure to various Spanish dialects, you will be able to pick that one up just as easily. Okay. Now let's see. Okay, to sound like Tarzan, says Mariana. Glad to hear that. The trilinguist says, muchas gracias por tu respuesta. Genial. De nada. Christopher, not long ago, just, I'm catching up. You see, guys, you weren't putting enough questions. I'm going to catch up very soon. If I catch up, then that means this live Q&A is over. So you guys better be asking me questions, because we are at 9 minutes past, and I'm currently at 3 minutes past in my scrolling of the comments here. So I say this because Christopher Robinson says, I always seem to catch you late on here. Well, that may be so, but you could still ask me a question. There's still time. This particular session, I figured it was okay for me to go over time a bit. So yeah, feel free to shoot some final questions for me here, guys, because once I reach the end, I'm going to start wrapping this up. Just giving you fair warning. Okay, so Damien says, I want to know about pronunciation and fluency in language. Tips, tricks, any tool recommended to you? How do you take on that part of language learning? Pronunciation, I mentioned this a bit previously, that I like to actually get singing lessons, but that's more about the musicality of the language, I'd say. Sometimes they do help me a lot with pronunciation. So getting that intensive learning from a singing teacher or even a speech therapist is another great one, even if you don't have a speech impediment. I happened to have a speech impediment when I was a child, so I needed a speech therapist, but I met a speech therapist who was a German, and she actually helped me understand a few of my pronunciation problems, because that's what she does for a living. So, you get use out of them, even as a language learner. Otherwise, what I would suggest that you do is take a audio recording, and it only needs to be a few seconds long. And this is something I did with my Portuguese teacher who helped me with my accent. Is she took one phrase. I think it was from a song. I forget what the phrase was, but it was just one phrase that only would take me like 5 seconds to say aloud. And we spent a half an hour on that phrase. Not on making it comprehensible, because it was a very simple phrase, whatever it was, but making sure I was pronouncing things correctly. She would drill it out of me and, say, no, you want to get your R right, you got to do it like this. And look where I've got my throat and what I'm doing with my tongue and the position I'm putting my lips in. And I was like, so I probably was not doing particularly well, but after a half hour I did great. So if you don't have a teacher who can help you with that intensively, take audio of your target language and take a very small segment of it, just a few seconds long, 10 seconds max, and play that back and record yourself. And then compare the two and listen to them one by one. Or if you want somebody to help you train it over a long period, something that my friend Idausa does when he's coaching people and getting their accent improved, is he gets them to upload on SoundCloud. So SoundCloud is like the audio version of YouTube. And the great thing about it is you can leave comments on specific parts of the audio. So he would leave a comment like 3 seconds in and say, "Your P is too plosive. Stop doing that." So, you can put comments on particular, not even syllables, but actual, what's the word, phonemes or specific one parts of sounds. I'm not much for technical vocabulary. So you can work on those specific sounds through SoundCloud or through a native speaker. Hope that answers that question. Okay, moving on. So I got some people answering each other's questions, which is great. David says, what's the best Spanish book to learn verbs? I'm going to have to answer that question in my book, Hangout, tomorrow. And if you scroll up in the comments, you'll see that there was a comment about all of the different times that I'm going to be doing it tomorrow, depending on where you live. Okay. Do you think it's a good idea? This is a question from Alan on Facebook. Do you think it's a good idea to learn a third language using the second language? I think it is a great idea. This is actually a process called laddering, of using a language you have learned to learn another language. And I do this a lot because one of my favorite language courses is the series of courses done by Assimil. And they do have courses in English, but their best ones are in French. So I have actually learned a lot of my languages through French because of this. I would take their course and use it, and it has a lot of advantages. So for instance, if I see the translation of the word computer in the language that I'm learning, and I'm learning it through English, I might see computer and whatever it is in the target language, and I might try to make an association, but I'm kind of like, I try to stop myself from doing this, but I do naturally associate it with the word computer in English. But when I'm learning it through French and I see the word for the first time and it's associated with the word ordinateur, then I'm less likely to associate it with that word, and I'm more likely to associate it with the concept. The concept of that thing with the keyboard and the screen that you use to get on the internet. And I associate the concept a lot easier. And I feel like that makes me translate a lot less in my head and feel more natural in using the language. So this is a huge advantage I've had in laddering, or in using the second language to learn a third. And yeah, I highly recommend it. It depends on the language. Some languages may not have as many resources. I think French is an exception. There are a lot of French resources for learning other languages. But in general, I would say some languages make it a bit harder unless you're learning a language specific to that country. So like if you were learning Quechua, then learning it through Spanish is actually going to be easier than learning it through English, So yeah, that's what I would say about laddering, or learning a second language or third language through a second. Christopher says, any idea on how to tell the difference between pretérito and imperfecto in Spanish? Oh, God. Like I mentioned before, I've learned a lot of these grammar terms through lots of exposure. So like trying to say them and getting corrected, because books will explain this. Like I could give you an explanation of what the difference is, but that's not new. That's something every book will tell you, that the imperfect, you use it when it's something that was ongoing and that didn't happen at one specific time necessarily. I would generally tend to think for the imperfecto, in many cases, can I say used to in English? It's a very simple thing. It doesn't work in a lot of the examples, but it helped a lot for me. So for instance, if I wanted to say, yesterday I ate a burrito, and I wanted to know, is it ayer comí or ayer comía, well, both of them technically work because you can use the comía if it's like, while you're doing something else. You could say, I was eating a burrito when suddenly a knock at the door. It's some kind of a narrative version of using it. But generally, the simple way is if you ask yourself, can you say, yesterday I used to eat a burrito? And that doesn't work in English because that's weird. So in that case, it is just very simply ayer comí. That's the simple past. But again, that explanation, there's a lot of examples you could give where that just doesn't work. But that's my rule of thumb. I would think, I imagined a timeline, and can I like pinpoint it at a specific moment? Can I like add information to it? Can I say yesterday at 4 p.m. I ate, and if I can be like add that extra specific information, then generally it's the simple past in Spanish, and same as in French, although the grammar terms are different and they use like a auxiliary verb and whatever. But that's kind of my quick rule of thumb. Otherwise, the books will help you, but the best thing you can do is just to speak, and don't worry too much about it. I promise you, if you are speaking to a Spaniard and you say ayer comía un burrito, then they won't be like, ¿qué? ¿Qué dices? Madre mía, no puede ser. They're not going to. You're not going to ruin friendships if you get one of your like verb forms wrong. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would try to just get more practice in Spanish. Those kind of things, I would just accept that I'm wrong and just whichever one is easier for me, use that most of the time. When I first started learning Spanish, I couldn't even use the past tense, so I would just say ayer yo como un burrito, and they understand. And it's you have to keep that in mind. Don't try to like be too perfect if you're in the beginner stages. If you're in the intermediate stages, then tomorrow I'll show you some of the grammar books that I use, and these are the ones I've used consistently over the years, that never as a beginner. If I pick them up as a beginner, it's going to make things worse for me rather than better, because I'm going to feel even more intimidated by all the stuff I don't know. But if I have gone through the Tarzan stage of being okay with making mistakes, and then later on I feel confident, I'm able to keep conversations flowing, then I'll go and study the books and I'll be like, that's the difference between that past and the other past. And then I'll do exercises, work with my teacher, fill in the gaps, all that kind of stuff that a lot of these books are great at testing. I would do it at that stage. Okay, so I hope that answered that question. Okay. Sebastian says, which flashcards app is best to learn vocabulary? I would generally go with Anki. There are other ones, but it usually depends on the content of what you're trying to learn. I know that the Innovative Language podcast series, and James shared that link above if you scroll up, their app includes a spaced repetition system for learning flashcards, which you can click while you're in their app, like as the words come up. So in that case, that is better in that you don't have the extra step of like getting the vocabulary from there to another app. And like in that time saving, it might be better for you. But in general, I tend to find Anki a little bit more useful for my purposes. Okay, so let's see. Jonathan Huggins says, I would appreciate your insights for reading section of language exams. Strategies for reading comprehension, dealing with time pressure, test anxiety, staying focused and calm. I can barely read that question in one breath, so I'm not sure how deeply I can get into this because I am now behind on a few minutes, and I'm going to definitely be wrapping this up, everybody, in 7 minutes, so feel free to ask your final questions. So let me see what I can help you with, Jonathan, on this. Reading comprehension, I think I was mentioning that before, was I? Yeah, maybe not. I would, because for me, reading comprehension, I could read the text and I would feel like I understand that text. And I think this is a mistake I had made early in a lot of my language learning examination projects, that I would base how confident, how good I am at reading by how I feel I've understood a text. So with reading comprehension, you have to make it about the questions. Because in the C levels, because in the lower levels, it's easy. They'll ask you, which country was the guy going to? And you're literally just like looking at the text and you see a country and that's the answer. But with the C levels, they tend to ask oblique questions. And that is really not something you'll get by essentially copying and pasting the answer from the text. And it does require you to understand on a very subtle level what you just read. So I would make understanding, I would not just practice reading. Like you are not improving your reading comprehension by reading a book. That's not going to help you with that part of the exam. You're practicing it by reading a chapter of a book and having questions asked of you of very specific things. So make sure your teacher is asking you that. Dealing with time pressure, I would sit as many tests as you can so you understand how you're doing for time, because you might end up overestimating how much time you have and realizing on the day that you actually only got half of this section done and your time's about to run out. So by doing mock exams, I saw, oh my god, this part, I have way less time than I thought I had, and then I know I need to up my pace and focus on that. Staying focused and calm, I would not take it too seriously in terms of thinking the world would end. I accepted before every single C exam and even my French B2 exam, I accepted that failure was an option, and this made me more relaxed because I did, like with the German one, I did not get the certificate in the end. But even so, that's fine, because on the day itself, I accepted if I don't pass this, I can sit it again. So don't be thinking on the day you have to pass this, or your life will be over. And I think that kind of pressure we put on ourselves is the reason we're stressed on exam days. And I feel like I've been actually very good with that in the language exams I've sat, because I've just accepted, it's fine. And I still remember my spoken exam in Spanish. I was joking with the examiner, and I was like, I didn't even use usted. And this is like a formal exam. I just went in saying, ¿qué tal estás? And just like, didn't care. And because it's just an exam. It's not going to end the world or anything, Okay, last couple of questions. Let's see. Pavan is a big fan from India. Started learning Russian. Finished the alphabet. But what's next? Please give me advice so I can reach the next level. If you've just learned the Cyrillic alphabet, I would know from learning the hiragana, katakana, writing systems in Japanese, learning Arabic script. What have you done to learn the alphabet? If you have just gone through different letters of the Cyrillic alphabet, that's one thing. But you need to make sure you are good at it in practice. So I would actually try to read text to a teacher who can correct you. That's what I would say your next stage is. Not just knowing the letters, but being able to use them in practice. So find a teacher and do that. If you haven't already, the next step should always be find a native speaker who's going to help you and practice with them. Don't just study and decide, you'll speak to someone in a few months. Get speaking now, but if you've already learned the alphabet, make sure you can actually use it, because learning just each letter one at a time is very different from being able to actually read it in the context of some written text. So I hope that helps Pavan with that question. Okay, let's see. I'm glad I can help you guys. I see you all thanking me for the questions I've been getting to. And you're more than welcome. Very happy to help with these. Jordan says, when will you write a language hacking book on Brazilian Portuguese? Maybe next. I'm in talks this month about the publisher. I can't confirm what the next languages are yet, but maybe it'll be next. I hope so. Okay, we've got some open-ended questions I can't really get to very easily. I'm scrolling back and I've caught up. Yay! So I know I didn't get to a lot of your questions. I guess I'll do this one I see here from Christopher as my final one. Is it better when learning words to read the definition in the target language? It's a very good question. It depends. I would say as an absolute beginner, you don't necessarily need to do that. I would just, because for me the focus has to be understanding and what is the best use of my time. So as a beginner, I don't think it's a good use of at least my time to be reading definitions in the other language, because I feel like I'm doing a recursive algorithm of I'll read a definition, but then the definition has like several words I don't know, so I'll read definitions of those words, and then like it might take me about 5 hours to look up the definition of one word because of like the chain of directions I split off into. So I would be okay with using, I mean, ideally I do like to know the concept, maybe use an image search, but realistically I do just use a dictionary that'll tell me what it means in English, because that's just the quickest way for me to understand that word in that moment as an absolute beginner. Now when you reach intermediate stage, things have to change. And with any languages I've reached B2 level in, and especially when I'm in, preparing for a C exam, then I gotta use a monolingual dictionary, a dictionary just in that language that gives me definitions, because then it's useful. Then I'm reading that definition and I actually understand it. I know what the words in the definition are. I have enough scope already that a dictionary in just that language is useful to me. I did try to use a Spanish-only dictionary when I was maybe A2 in Spanish, and it just wasn't useful to me. I wasn't ready for it, but I had used it then like many months later when I was preparing for my C2 exam, and it was useful. It kept me in the flow of understanding the words. And complaints, I don't want to hear complaints. But if I'm skipping questions, it's because it may not be a good question. You need to work on asking me useful questions. So keep that in mind, guys. Where do I live now? I live in New York. My future language goals are improve the languages I currently speak, and to have some mini projects this year for languages and places I might be going to. So I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys. Thanks so much for coming to this live Q&A and staying with me for an entire hour and a half if you've been here for this time. I hope I've been helpful, and you're more than welcome to come back and ask questions. If I haven't gotten to your question, I had a chance to look at a lot of questions today. If I haven't gotten to it, then keep copying and pasting the same question to me in future sessions. It's probably not the way to do it. You might want to think, is it not specific enough for me, or is it too general? I'm trying as best as I can to help people, but hopefully you guys are seeing what I'm doing in these as best as I can. So now that I've gotten to so many of your questions, I'll do another general one maybe in a week or so. But for now, I'm going to get to do specific versions of these live hangouts. So tomorrow is going to be just about books and courses. So we won't be getting into other questions. If you have other questions and you're watching this in the replay afterwards, and you have a question for me, then maybe save it for the next time you see I'm doing a general Q&A. But otherwise, see what my themes are and see if they appeal to you, and then stop by and hopefully I'll be able to help you out. So thanks everybody. Appreciate all your thank yous here on the side. Again, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure to click the notifications icon so you don't miss these in future. Make sure to check out my other channels and stuff, because I don't do this just on whichever system you've been watching this on. I do this on a bunch of other systems. And yeah, I love hanging out with you guys, seeing how you're all doing and giving you some language learning inspiration. So thanks for joining me as always, and happy language learning, guys. See you tomorrow or whenever.